welcome you all here today for our primary candidate forum, where you're going to be able to hear from all three Republican primary candidates. The format today will be, we will ask each candidate to do a brief introduction of themselves, possibly a platform and the roots. They have 3 to 5 minutes to do that introduction. Up to 5 minutes, hopefully between somewhere 3 and 5. We want to be efficient so that we can get as many questions as possible this morning. Doug, where are you today? Okay. Doug will be somewhere sitting here in the audience. That he will be the timekeeper. He'll let the candidates know by waving a sign up that says a minute left or 30 seconds left. I can't recall which one he has.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. So you're going to have to wrap it up really quick. If you don't wrap it up within those 30 seconds, my cue usually is this. And then we'll cut it and wrap it together. Once your introduction's over, the chamber has developed a few questions that we'll lob out in no specific order. And then we'll open it to the audience, time permitting, to allow for questions. All right? Well, we're ready to go. I know we do have a few elected officials here in the audience. I know that Mayor Palladino is here. Councilmember DiPolito, thank you. One time I know I messed that up. And Mayor Lawrence, Mayor McFarland, and Commissioner Poe. Have I missed anyone that stepped in that's not? Thank you for attending as well. All right, so we're going to start with the introductions. I know I've got my stopwatch as well, but Doug's going to be the true keeper of time. We're going to go ahead and start with Kathleen and move our way down with the introduction phase, 3 to 5 minutes. Thank you, Kathleen Peters.
And good morning. It's good to see you. I'm Kathleen Peters. As I look around the room, I see most of you. That's great. A lot of you know me in different capacities. The mayor over here has known me for 26 years. And you know me because I'm a local person. You know, my business that I bought and ran for 26 years, my husband and I had, was right down the street on Safety Beach. We had a convenience store and a delicatessen. And so what I can tell you is I know small business. And I love talking to the chambers because we talk the same language. Chambers are all about small business. And I just spent the last 5 years working for the Clearwater Regional Chamber of Commerce, working for their government affairs, and working to help small business navigate the bureaucratic process of local government, of state government, and federal government. So I feel like I'm among friends. What I do know is that what we need in Washington is somebody who knows this and understands it. Somebody who knows Pinellas County and understands Pinellas County, and our small business and our uniqueness. But more than even that, we need someone that we know is going to fight for us. And we can count on it. And that's what I'm here to offer you. For those of you that know me, you know that I have fought for our children for years, ensuring that they had a safe place to go when government was deciding to arrest them at school. And we're local governments, we're going to put curfews in and arrest our kids and not let them have jobs past 9 o'clock at night. If you remember all that, if you've been here that long. And so we opened up teen centers to make sure they had a safe place to go and they weren't getting arrested and they weren't getting in trouble. And we were arresting them at school, and we came up with good, solid solutions that worked on public-private partnerships to make sure that our children's futures were being ruined. And that's critically important, that we don't ruin our children's future. But more than that, let's talk about St. Beach and Pinellas. And several years ago, when the state of Florida was going to put a constitutional amendment that would have devastated the economy of this state. Y'all remember Amendment 4? Y'all remember hometown democracy? And nobody knows that better than this city right here. And because of the local ordinance this city put in, when we let government take over and get overreaching and go too far, it shuts down our economy, and that's what we're experiencing. And I want somebody who's going to say, no, we're not going to allow it, but I also want to know that someone's going to fight for us. And how are we going to know that? We know that by track records. And when I look at candidates, I say, you know what, don't give me all the platitudes and all that. Tell me what you've done and what you're gonna do for me. So let's talk about what I've done for business and for the economy. And when Amendment 4 got put on that ballot, and this city went into an economic recession before the rest of the country did because their local city put that on their charter, I went out and in 4 months I did more than 70 presentations, debates, and interviews to make sure that that constitutional amendment did not pass. Now, it wasn't my job. I didn't have to do it, but I knew that if that became a state constitution, that Florida would be doomed as far as our economy and what would happen. We still have boarded up resorts on this city, on the Gulf of Mexico, just because of the local level. So you want to talk about a track record. I have 5 years at the Clearwater Regional Chamber of Commerce protecting businesses and promoting economic development. I've got 5 years of writing policy. There's not another candidate here that has written policy and then had to vote for it. And let me tell you, those elected officials in the room, you know what I'm talking about. It's hard to vote for something when you have to analyze it all the way. And you can look at my track record and you know. She's written policy, she's voted for policy, and she's written and voted for good policy that's good for jobs, good for economic development, that's going to help promote our economy and our jobs. That's the only way we fix it, is repealing the regulations and make sure we have jobs and that we can take home more in our paychecks. And that's what I offer to you, is that experience. Thank you.
And we have Mr. Mark Bircher.
Thank you, ma'am. Certainly appreciate this opportunity. My name is Mark Bircher. My background is courtesy of the American people. I received an education for obligation of 5 years of military service. I stayed in for 12. I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed the people. Stayed in another 21 years with the Marine Corps Reserve. Retired in 2009, and I've been an airline pilot for 25 years while I was staying in the reserves. And I have a law practice. Limited only to pro bono at this point. About 12 years ago, the airlines weren't doing too well, so I went into had to have an alternate plan, so I went to law school, and fortunately, I've been able to just take the cases that I want to take because of the interest. So that's my background. In the Marine Corps, I was very fortunate. I haven't written law, but when you're the second in command of 50,000 people in the world's largest fighting organization, the 1st Marine Expeditionary Force, believe me, you make policy. It's amazing what 50,000 people can do. Most of it good, most of it forward in combat, but in the rear, my job was to get people ready to go forward to Iraq and Afghanistan. So I'm used to running big organizations. I was in command of the 4th Marine Aircraft Wing. I was in command of the Marine Forces South. So I've been around large organizations, and I understand how the relationship with government after 33 years in the federal service. The common theme for my background is service, and that's what I think I bring to the constituents here. When you serve sailors and Marines, when you serve your customer as an airline pilot, when you serve your client as a lawyer, you're welded at the hip to the notion of service. But there's another kind of service I want to bring up here too, and that's the service we should expect from our federal government. And that service is a consequence many times of our representation. And I'm not satisfied with that representation. We remember that the states created the federal government for one purpose, and that's to serve us, to serve the states. Well, in a staggering role reversal, I'm not feeling that relationship is the same anymore. I feel that the federal government in many cases lost their way, which is our fault for not minding our store. I see bureaucracy, inefficiency, regulation, compliance, debt, and deficit. I think that needs to be turned around, mostly because it's unsustainable. But here's the important thing to the chamber in my view. There was a revolution a couple hundred years ago in this country where the idea that you could change your station through hard work, that you could become a landowner, that you could be a business owner. You weren't stuck in old Europe where you were going to be whatever you were. And the purpose of that federal government was to print money, common defense, foreign policy, and a post office. And what does that mean? That means business. Common defense means you could run your farm, your merchant store without worrying about being invaded. Foreign policy was to keep your markets open. Printing money was so you'd have currency to trade. And the post office was to keep our communications. So remember what all that function was for you. It wasn't to regulate, it wasn't to take money from you. And when I see for every dollar that we spend running the bureaucracy, in my opinion, an inefficient one, there were 4 departments at the time of the framing: State, Treasury, Judiciary, and Defense. Now there's 15 cabinets and 6 equivalents. If you go to USA.gov, there's 463 agencies and organizations. It's a lot of overhead. You're business people, you know what that means. I think we can do better. Essentially, the platform I have is to transition back to the states where the Constitution says these functions belong, with the exception of a couple of things. One is Social Security, and the other one's Medicare. People paid into Medicare and Social Security. They have a property interest in it. It was a promise made by government. It needs to be protected. That is a solemn promise. I think the government owes you. I think your representative owe you. So that's my platform. Control spending, return our liberty, increase our business. Thank you very much.
And Mr. David Jolly.
Thank you, folks, for having us this morning. Listen, this is a great day for Pinellas County. Every time we have a forum like this, I say we have 3 great candidates in this primary race. You can't go wrong with this. We have 3 Pinellas County residents on the Republican side. The Democrats can't say that on their side. So this is a great day. I'm proud to be up here with these 2 folks here. Listen, I'm down the road here in Indian Shores. I'm proud to see my mayor, Bob Lawrence, who on day 1 endorsed our campaign and has been out supporting us. Thank you, Mayor, for that. Bill Priakis as well. I believe a former member of the Chamber Board here. Nice to see you this morning. I had the opportunity to work alongside our Congressman Bill Young for nearly 20 years in a variety of capacities. Essentially my first job out of Congress, and then after I left government service in private counsel with him until he passed away. This race isn't about who was closest to Mr. Young. It's not about the fact that I worked for Mr. Young, but it does speak to experience and qualifications to make an impact on behalf of Pinellas County and these communities on day 1. We are applying for a job here, and I'm asking that you consider our qualifications. The opportunity that I had to work alongside Mr. Young, I believe, came to me. I'm a person of faith as a result of providence. The truth is, when I got to Washington in 1995, having never been north of Tennessee, I wanted to work for one of the young firebrand Republicans that was part of the '94 revolution. And I ended up getting a job with Mr. Young. And I thought at the time, at 21 years old, thinking I knew everything. Well, I don't want to work for this old guy that's already been in office for 20 years. The truth is, I had no idea the experience that I was about to embark on and how it would change my life to work for one of the greatest legislators the United States Congress has ever seen. I believe that. As a result of having worked alongside him, I'd like to talk about 4 things this morning that are central to my platform. We can talk about more, or talk more in detail perhaps during the question and answer. But 4 things that I think are important to this county and to the beach communities. First, it starts with jobs. We know Mr. Young left us a legacy of having invested in jobs, both skilled and unskilled jobs here in Pinellas County. Maintaining the economic development, maintaining the quality of life, maintaining wages here in Pinellas County. He did a lot of that through investment in the defense industry. I would be proud to carry on that legacy, and it's something that I believe, based on my experience, understanding the federal budget process, knowing how we can continue to sustain both skilled and unskilled jobs here in Pinellas County, that would be something that I would step in on day 1 and believe I would bring unique qualifications to work on. Flood insurance is something I know we'll talk about this morning. I know the other candidates supported delaying bigger waters as well. We must delay bigger waters, but frankly, that's not the answer. A bad law today is a bad law 4 years from now, and simply delaying it for 4 years isn't the answer. We each have different ideas. I have proposed, at least in concept, the idea of a national natural disaster insurance program. Until the Brandis-Ahern bill can really take effect and bring in private sector solutions here in the state, I'd like to see us examine a national flood insurance policy that better aggregates the risk across the country, from earthquakes on the west coast to ice in the northwest, to tornadoes in the plain states, to the northeast snowstorms, to the southeast floods and hurricanes. Let's aggregate the risk and stabilize that market. Thirdly, offshore oil drilling. I am proud to support the current ban of 230 miles. I don't think we need any encroachment. The current moratorium, I believe, exists through 2022. That is something we should maintain. It's important. The military mission line buffer on top of the already 125-mile ban, we have to keep that. And then finally, beach renourishment. I'm proud to support beach renourishment. It's something we have to do. We must do it. I understand all of the studies. I know that erosion occurs 2 to 3 times faster based on artificial beach renourishment than natural, but we don't have a choice. Our local economy and our homeowners here on the beach rely on it. There's a federal-state share. Ultimately, given the restrictions and budgeting on the federal side, I think the state will have to continue to increase its share of beach renourishment money, but at the end of the day, it is something we have to protect. So, listen, I appreciate the opportunity to be here this morning, and I ask that you consider our campaign. Thank you.
Okay, now to the question and answer portion of this wonderful candidate forum. We will ask the candidates to answer the questions from their seat, if you don't mind. And that'll just save us from jumping up Jack in the Box all morning. And these questions have come from our government committee at the chamber. First question, and why don't we start this time, since I started with Kathleen for the intro, I'll start with Mr. Bircher on this one. You have 3 minutes to answer the question, hence answer the question, not 3 minutes to go around the question. What do you recommend needs to be done to solve the fiscal issues in Washington, D.C.?
3 things. Redefine the purpose of our federal government and what the purpose is not in our federal government. That's written in the Constitution. Understand the notion that there isn't $1 in Washington, D.C. to give us if we don't first put there through taxation or even the more pernicious policy of writing debt. And third, spending accountability, which we had for the first 124 years of this republic prior to the 16th Amendment. For example, in 1908, Teddy Roosevelt sent 16 United States Navy battleships around the world, 14,000 sailors. There was not a personal income tax. The federal government can do what they need to do if they stay in their lane. And that lane is as clear as English can be written. Redefine the purpose, what it is not. Understand there's no wealth which we don't first put there. And spending accountability for our representatives.
Thank you. And Mr. Jolly.
In the theme of 3 things, I'd say 3 things are going to help us on this one. 1, economic growth, which frankly is creating an environment in which the private sector grows and thus creates additional revenue. I'm not for additional revenue through tax increases of any kind, but I think economic growth, as we saw Bill Clinton likes to say, balance the budget in 1999. I think Bill Gates balanced the budget in 1999 because we had an internet economy that increased revenue for the federal government. We can use across-the-board cuts at the top-line level with the discretionary budget across departments. I don't think across-the-board cuts are good at what we call subcategory spending. But listen, I think every federal department can use a constriction. And I think it's responsible to suggest the federal agencies should go back to their budgets and figure out where the cost savings are. Ultimately, though, the only way to balance the budget is going to be entitlement spending. Around 1960, I believe, entitlement spending, that's mandatory spending on programs like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, interest on the debt. Around 1960, and Adam, don't politifact me on this, it was about 35% of our federal budget, somewhere in that range, give or take 5. Right now, spending on Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, interest on the debt, sits around 65 to 70% of our federal budget. That growth curve will lead us to, in our lifetime, seeing mandatory spending consume every dollar that our federal treasury takes in annually. Now, this is important, and I appreciate Mark's comments earlier about Social Security and Medicare. I do not think that we can change the current promised benefits for participants in the program, and frankly, for folks like the 3 of us up here. I like to say I am not too young to rely on promises that Washington has made to me. I have made a financial plan based on promises that Washington has made to me. Individuals in this room, should not suffer because Washington is bad at math. But part of being a fiscal conservative also says we're going to take responsibility. And what that means is we are going to account for the out-year unfunded obligation of our entitlement programs. Whatever that number is. Some would say it's 50 trillion, some would say it's 100 trillion. We're going to own that, we're going to put it on our balance sheet. We're going to say this is actually the amount of money that we have promised individuals. We're going to own that. If we have to debt that, we debt that, but we're going to own that. And then we're going to turn around to future participants of programs and say, now let's talk about a new program that's more actuarially sound, upon which you can make, with certainty, a life financial plan for your own.
Solving the fiscal issues. I think first off, since you and I, every city, every state has to work with a balanced budget, why shouldn't Washington? I think absolutely we should move in the direction of having some kind of a balanced budget. And it might take us a little while to get there, but I think that needs to be our goal and that needs to be our objective. I also believe that we have to have pro-business policies. Right now, government is so overreaching and we've got so many regulations that it's hurting business, and there's no certainty. Businesses can't grow because there's no certainty. They have no idea what's going to happen next year. And every time they think, okay, this year I'm going to get hit, our federal government says, we're going to postpone it hitting business till next year. So can business move forward? No, because there's still so much uncertainty. And so we have to start pulling back all of these overreaching regulations. And when I was with the chamber for the last year and a half, I've been working with Washington, trying to get them to rein in just the Dodd-Frank. And let's take title companies alone. The first year they put regulations from Dodd-Frank, and they're passing these bills without even knowing what the policies are going to be, and when the rubber hits the road, what is going to happen. But Dodd-Frank, first year of regulations, cost one title company, we talked about the analysis and what it cost, 17% of their bottom line. It costs just the title company who's not even regulated by Dodd-Frank for training, for reporting, and auditing. That gets passed on to you and me. The second year of Dodd-Frank regulations, 22%, additionally, 22% to their bottom line cost, who isn't even regulated by Dodd-Frank, and who's paying for it? You and I. They've now put in a whole nother year. They're not even done writing the new regulations for that act. And every time they do it, they're taking away our ability for capital venture. They're taking away our ability for businesses to grow and prosper. And until we stop this overarching regulation on our business, we cannot guarantee that our Americans can have jobs and that our businesses can thrive. And small business, where are we going to be with small business? Because I'll tell you, that was my livelihood. That was my father's livelihood. That was my grandfather's livelihood, was small business. And small business is going away. And we need to stop that. So absolutely, we need to rein in the regulations. We need to balance that budget, and we need to come up with pro-business policies that are going to help grow our economy and ensure that every American can have a job and that we can compete globally. That's what it's going to take. Thank you.
Okay, our next question. Could you elaborate on how you truly understand the value tourism has on our economy and how pristine our beaches are and its correlation to a thriving tourism economy? And we'll start with Mr. Jolly.
Listen, this is a parochial issue for all of us in this room. And I understand as a fiscal conservative, most people would say, well, we can't invest in beach renourishment. We have to, because our local economy relies on it. Offshore oil drilling, frankly, within the Republican Party, most people who live outside of the Gulf states would say we have to expand oil drilling because we need an energy platform that includes expanded oil drilling. We can't do that. Listen, we are choosing who to elect from District 13 to represent Pinellas County, Florida. The Pinellas County economy relies on those two things. And we have to defend that. We have to elect somebody that defends that. We know that tourism is the main driver of our economy here locally. We know that. We have to protect that. It's right before our eyes. I'm proud in this instance to have had the opportunity to work alongside Congressman Young as the money was provided for beach renourishment. I believe there was about $100 million over the course of maybe the last 10 years, but I know the number topped $100 million sometime in 9 or 10 for beach renourishment. It's not the long-term solution to keep going to the federal government, but right now it's the only solution, and it's something that
Move to Kathleen.
Tourism is the #1 industry in Florida. And across the nation, tourism is very important. And I agree, offshore drilling is absolutely not. There's many reasons why we don't go for offshore drilling. And if you all remember, we had 2 barges collide right at the mouth of Tampa Bay. And that hit just right here. And the news made it sound like our whole state was covered in oil, and it impacted us. So absolutely no, we are not, or I am not, pro-oil drilling. And again, you all know my stance on that because I've been in this community and fighting that for a long time. But tourism is very important to us, and we need to maintain that. We need to maintain our pristine beaches. But our pristine beaches is not just, and we talk about beach renourishment. Now, I helped bring home beach renourishment just this year. And originally the money that the state was going to allocate was only for Treasure Island, but we were able to work with Congressman Young's office. And we were able to work a deal to be more efficient and more effective, and we brought in 2 cities. So you know that I've been fighting for beach renourishment for this community, not only as a state, but as a mayor, I was fighting for that as well, and at my role in the chamber. But it's critical, not just for our pristine beaches, it's critical to protect our infrastructure. That is what's most critical. I mean, it absolutely is critical. We need it for our pristine beaches. And many people say, oh, we're subsidizing the hotels. But that's not true. We're protecting our infrastructure, and it's critical. And we have to preserve that. We have to ensure that our tourism industry stays. It's what we can count on. And it is so fragile. It is so fragile. We've had too many things where we get impacted by weather, by oil shifts, by oil drilling that impacts our tourism in the state, and we need to protect it, grow it. Now going on to Panama, we have more flights coming in. We need to promote this. We have the greatest country in the world, and we need to be promoting tourism globally. I mean, I love what Copa Airlines is doing for us, and we need to keep doing it. We need to keep growing.
Kathleen.
Thank you.
Okay. This was a lively topic.
Mark
Oh, I'm
answered.
sorry. Gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm anxious about this next question. So, yes. Mark.
I couldn't agree with what's been stated here. Tourism beaches. If you imagine a picture of Florida on the map, I think we can point to the physical shape of Florida and what's at risk as opposed to the others that there's just different metrics involved. Ours is, it's been stated already, so that's beyond reasonable dispute that our beaches and our tourism, every business kind of rests on that foundation in my view. I would submit maybe I have a little bit of a different plan. I've lost confidence in federal solutions, whether they're healthcare or mortgage insurance or anything else. I think the states and the collaboration of the governors of like-minded, of like interests would be a far greater, a more efficient mechanism to solve these issues. For example, every dollar you send to Washington to come back to the state to help you, it doesn't look like $1 anymore. It looks like a lot less than $1. So I've lost confidence that the federal government is the answer for our problems. I think we get better solutions here, which doesn't mean we can't collaborate with other states on these issues of beaches and tourism. We cannot take the risk of the oil, in my view. I do think that we would be better here using our own entrepreneurial spirit to solve these problems and our own resources in a more efficient manner than the federal government. That's probably the difference in my view to protect beaches and tourism.
Thank you. Okay. As we all know, we can skip ahead here in the flood insurance issue. We already know what the issue is, and if you don't call me on my cell phone and I'll give you a one-on-one. And we already know from the press that we have a recommended delay. So we're going to jump ahead here. We'd like to know, if you were elected, what is your recommended solution to the NFIP issue? And now we can start with Mr. Drone. No, I'm sorry, Kathleen.
you know, what we need to do long-term, I believe, is allow the private industry to take care of that. And I believe that the competitiveness in the private industry can do that. My concern is a lot of the solutions that have been proposed is that they're not looking at business. And we have to make sure that, because I believe some of the policies that are already being presented are not looking at small business. And we have to make sure that the small business is protected just like everyone else. And we don't start adopting plans years in advance that we don't know what it looks like. And that's what Washington seems to be really good at. And, you know, I contend, we got 3 mayors in this room. Can any of you adopt a law without knowing what it's gonna look like? We can't do that anymore. So we need to come up with a policy that's gonna protect our businesses, our homeowners, and even our second homeowners. But I think private business is really truly gonna be the most effective way to go versus subsidies.
And Mr. Bircher.
My house is in the flood zone. That's neither here nor there, other than I have probably an elevated interest. Pinellas County, we all know this is the #1 place for flood zone. 33 to 38,000 homes. We pay the most and we receive the least. To me, the problem is systemic, and Ms. Peters touched on it. The whole notion that we're considering making a bill requiring our representatives to read bills before they vote on them, that tells me all I need to know about how we're minding our own store. If somebody's telling me they're going to vote on a bill and they haven't read it, I've lost confidence right there. So I think we need to kind of reevaluate who we're sending and how much trust we have. I mean, only in the federal government could one of the sponsors of Bigger at Waters be leading the charge to delay it. I mean, that's a little inspiring in one hand, but it's very disappointing on the other. No business would ever come up with a plan that goes on for years, gets $25 billion in debt, and then goes to someone, that's $1,700, that's $8,000 next year. I mean, you just can't get there. You can't even dream some of this stuff up. So again, I believe it should come back. What Ms. Peters said, I believe the free market cannot be worse than the federal government. And I find no examples where free market solutions from business, from people that know what they're doing, isn't a better answer. So specifically, delay as long as we can, Bigger at Waters, come up with our own plan, implement it, and not really worry about the federal government, because if we have the right people up there, they won't matter. Corps of Engineers should be in the support of the states.
Thank you. And Mr. Jolly.
Rarely does the federal government get involved in solving a problem and find a way to reduce costs and increase efficiency. And the flood program is exactly an example of that. Listen, I like what Jeff Brandis and Larry Ahern have introduced at the state level to encourage private industry solutions to this. I know they have an expedited approval process that they are proposing, as well as a proposal that would require insurance only on the existing mortgage, not on the total value of the property. Solutions like that ultimately are going to solve this. On the federal level, though, we have gotten so deep into this problem that we have to continue to work on a federal solution until the time comes when a private sector solution has been found. The truth is about the flood insurance program, if somebody doesn't have insurance, if a region like New Jersey is hit by a massive natural disaster, the federal government steps in anyway with emergency funding. So you have to kind of ask the question, well, what's the point of a flood insurance program if there's under-enforcement and participation, and then when those who don't participate are damaged or injured, they actually receive a federal assistance handout anyway. That's how broken the Washington program is. What I propose is, at least in concept at this point, until a private sector solution can be found, is a natural disaster insurance fund that better aggregates risk across the country. Communities on the West Coast from earthquakes to plain state tornadoes and flooding to northeast snow to southeast hurricanes. The idea being, let's better aggregate and diversify the risk. As we increase that risk pool, it'll allow us to stabilize the overall market. But again, that is simply a solution until what I ultimately believe is the private sector solution is going to step forward because it's going to be cheaper and more efficient.
Thank you. And I'm sure y'all would agree, we probably want to read the bill in its entirety before you cast a vote. Okay, and our next question, this one is going to be really easy for you to answer in less than 3 minutes, because we just want A, B, or C. Relative to the current Affordable Care Act, would you A, modify to improve it, B, support it as is, or C, overturn it completely and replace it with something else? Or D, refuse to answer? Mr. Bircher?
C.
C, overturn it completely and create something else. Okay, Mr. Jolly?
C.
And Kathleen?
C. Can I add something to it?
Nope, that's it. Thank you
You're
very much.
up. Pass the bill and read it.
Oh,
More than pass the bill and read it.
no,
Demand that
read
there's-
it before you vote.
Right, but demand that there's an analysis to it that tells you what the costs are and where the costs are going to be felt. We have to do that at the local level, we have to do it at the state level. Why are we not doing that at the federal level?
Thank you.
There you go.
Okay, I have one more question that the chamber has developed, and then we'll open it up to some people in the audience. And this one's just more of a kind of, a feel good. When we have people that are in elected positions, whether it's at the county level, the state, or the federal level, constituents as a whole, they want to know that you're accessible to them. And so the chamber would like you to answer, and we'll start now with Mr. Bircher, is what is your plan, if elected, on how you would make yourself accessible to your constituents as you're in DC, working very hard for the people of Pinellas County?
Well, my plan would be first to have every action of every day that has an interest in an open forum. What bill's coming up, what I plan on voting for, just a complete access to what I plan on doing so that there can be feedback. And also access to, I think it's important if I'm running a store to have transparency on the open account. What is being spent on everything, trips or snacks or anything. I just think that transparency is important so you know what's going on. So I'd have the information available for feedback and what it's costing you for me to be your representative.
Thank you. And Mr. Jolly?
I agree with Mark on transparency. I also think particularly, since we will be electing a new member of Congress, regardless if it's one of the three of us or the Libertarian candidate or the Democratic candidate, listen, this will be a maturation process for our entire community, not just for the member of Congress. I like the concept of having some type of open office hours on the calendar, at least a day a month or maybe a couple days a month where it truly is open access. And listen, we're all in this, at least I hope I can speak for the others, I'm sure I can. We're all in this because of a sense of service. I promise you this hasn't been an exciting way to spend Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's, is running this election. But I'll give you an example. Shortly after I announced, I was approached by an organization who said, hey, will you come meet with our group on Tuesday night, I believe it was. We had a great conversation for about an hour and a half. Honestly, there's probably 20% of the issues we didn't agree on, and that's not an easy position to be in, to sit in that seat and say, no, I don't agree with you, but let's talk about it. At the end of the meeting, they asked if we could commit to at least meeting every 6 months, and I said, well, let's aim for once a month. 6 months isn't enough. We're all in this for community service. The only way we know that we are appropriately representing the people of this county is if we have that line of communication and that accessibility. At the end of the day, we're here because you're offering to give us a job. And the day you decide we're not worthy of that job, you should have the opportunity to remove us from that job.
Accessibility is most important because if we're representing the people, how can we do it if we're not talking to them and they're not accessible and we're not accessible? I think it's critically important. And again, I like to know that I can count on what people say to me and they're not just giving platitudes. So I fall back on my track record. Do I support open government? I sure do. I've lived it for 5 years at the local level and the state level. I believe, and I try currently to make sure that I have staff at meetings and I go to neighborhood association meetings already. And that's not going to change. And if I can't be there, my staff goes there. Because we have to be accessible. My office is open 5 days a week, so people are accessible. And I've always had my cell phone that I've given, my personal cell phone, out. Matter of fact, it was on my website up until this new one, but it'll get put back on. I've never not been accessible. It's critically important because how can you represent? That's what we're doing. We're representing you. How can we do that if we don't have accessibility? And open government, I think, is really important. And even farther than that, I have always made it open policy that anybody who wanted to know what it was like to sit in the chair of a legislator or a mayor or a congresswoman, every single time I've gone something, I have opened it up and said, if you're interested, come and sit in my chair, be a legislator for a day. There are 3 people in this room that have taken me up on that offer. And one person wanted to have a job, and it was a job I was very familiar, and I even told him, this is what you do in your job. And this is how you do it with your, matter of fact, all 3 of them. Because it's that important. And that's how we grow leadership. It's not just the accessibility, but it's also our responsibility to go above and beyond and grow leadership and make sure that our future leaders truly understand the role of government in our community and our society. And so I've opened up that when I was mayor, I've opened it up as a state legislator, and I'm proud to say there's 3 people in this room that took me up on it, and they were legislators for a day. And I'll bet you if you asked them what they learned from it, was it a good experience, and wow, did I understand things a whole lot better, and thank you for giving me that access. When the rubber hits the road, I walk the talk, and you know you can count on it, and I certainly will be accessible. And I understand the important role of chambers of commerce. I think they're critical, and I was proud to work for them for another 5 years.
Okay, so for the next few moments, we're going to open this up to a few questions from the audience. We didn't pass out our index cards because we do have an intimate setting here. We can hear each other. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and then okay, sir. And I just want to remind the candidates that they have 3 minutes or less to answer, whether it's directed to a specific person or you want to allow free to answer. Could you let that know when you ask your question?
What do you think needs to be done to fix the federal No Child Left Behind Act?
Anyone?
It was supposed to be taken up in 07. They still haven't taken it up.
Anyone to answer?
Mark, why don't you take that? Be like this.
Well, my friend David Jolly does know me on this issue. To me, no child left behind, it might as well be no child left alone. The role, I come from Virginia where I was educated in high school, and Thomas Jefferson so feared central government educating children, he started the University of Virginia because of the free flow of thoughts and ideas. That's so important. I don't really want to know the federal government's role in core or No Child Left Behind because I don't see it written down in Article 1, Section 8. I don't see a need for conformity there. In fact, it scares me as a student of history that when governments tell children what to think and what to say, it isn't long until they tell them what to do. And history is resplendent with government's reach into the education of children to the peril of history, in my view. I'd feel the same way if the UN came in and said, hey, we have an idea. I wouldn't want to get past the idea. It's not your lane. Stay in your enumerated powers, do what you're supposed to do. We do what we need down here, and that's what the framers wanted. 13, now 50 entities in competition has a much better chance for a better outcome, the good ones being emulated, rather than the monolithic Soviet model that we all know how that ends up. So I don't believe in that program at all.
Did you want it from everybody?
Yes.
So I'll tell you, my core philosophy is education decisions need to be made as close to the student as possible. We have a lot of talk about standards, and I think when we talk about standards, the real concern is really mandates. The suggestion that a bureaucrat or an agency can impose from Washington, D.C. onto a local classroom here locally. I think that's the largest concern we have. At the same time, though, I'm not afraid of taking a look at standards that are proffered by experienced people. I think generally where we go wrong, though, is to suggest that a bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. is the right person that proffers those standards. But we're talking about opportunities to look at standards, but not mandates. mandates are where we go completely wrong. The decisions need to be made closest to the student. I will tell you, there's been some conversation about completely abolishing the Department of Education. I don't support that. I think that sends the wrong message to the world stage. I think it can be greatly constricted. I think most of our federal agencies can be greatly constricted. At the end of the day, though, I don't support education decisions, curriculum decisions coming out of Washington, D.C. And frankly, it scared me that they even come out of Tallahassee, but I recognize some schools locally need the resources of the larger.
Thank you.
And I believe education, the closer we are to the school, the better system we're gonna have. I also believe that education has got to be one of the number one things that this country looks at. We can't fix the unemployment problem unless we fix the education issue. Does it belong at the federal level mandating down? No. And I've never supported mandates down. As a mayor, I fought them when we get mandates down to local cities, state. I fight them when the federal government mandates, the state does it. I don't support mandates, and I've got a track record of not supporting it. I will tell you, though, it is critically important that we have a strong workforce. We can't be competitive if we don't have a strong workforce. So education has got to be a number one priority of every single city, county, and state in this country. Because without a strong workforce, we can't be competitive, and we can't keep our businesses growing. So it's critically important that we are educating every single student. But should the federal government be mandating it all down? No. I think the closer we are to the local level doing it, the better. But it is critically important to our future and our economic development that we have a good, strong education system for every single child.
And maybe next, ma'am, I know that Councilmember Toledo asked a question, and then Brad will have you go.
Thank you, and this is specifically a question to Ms. Bauer today. I've had the pleasure of knowing Congressman Young in two capacities. One as a study owner currently, and then also at a previous corporation job at Honeywell. So I had the pleasure working with at both of those times. I'd like for you to answer, we've talked about offshore drilling today, and I think that there's some indication that you have done some work in DC as a lobbyist for offshore drilling. That's the one answer. And the other is, there was an article in the paper about your providing funds to Democrats on, I guess it was on Boyd and Nelson. So I'd like to send the right person to DC, but, you know, and I know from Congressman Young's position that all three of you are working very hard to be the right person. But I'd like those answers to
I'd be happy to address that. Your first question about offshore oil drilling, I've never lobbied for offshore oil drilling, and I'd be interested what information you might be suggesting, because that's never happened. And I'm not suggesting you are fabricating this, but if that information's in the public domain, it's a complete fabrication. So I want to make that very clear. I've also had to dispel other fabrications about my lobbying. I own several businesses. I'm an attorney. I'm a consultant. I also have registered as a lobbyist for several clients. And let's talk about what that means. What that means is I know how to work with a very complex federal government. I work to get funding for the U.S. Marshal Service to go after sex offenders, for parents who had lost kids to sex offenders. And I'm proud of that work. That was hard work to do. I've worked to advance medical research for returning wounded warriors with amputations, to regenerate and encourage tissue growth. I'm proud of that. That's hard work to get that done with a complex federal government. I've worked with Pinellas County businesses with technologies that they are trying to get the Department of Defense to look at to save American lives. They didn't know how to work with a complex federal government. I assisted. I'm proud of that. That's advocacy. To comply with the law, I have to register as a lobbyist. You can call it lobbying, you can call it advocacy. I'm absolutely proud of that. Offshore oil drilling? Absolutely not. Obamacare? Absolutely not. I haven't lobbied for either one of those. Giving to Democrats? I have. And you know what? In the spirit of Bill Young, a man who taught us that Republicans and Democrats and independents can work together, I bring that spirit to the table. I like to say when I registered to vote, I registered as a Republican because I believe in the Republican platform. But I never subscribe to the notion that Democrats are always wrong or independents are always wrong, because we know that's not true. I'm proud to have friends across the aisle. In terms of my giving, most of my giving followed personal relationships. Most of the people that it's been promoted that I gave to, frankly, were very strong on national defense issues. Listen, I don't run from the truth. That's true. I have contributed Democrats, and if I'm elected, I'm going to represent my core conservative beliefs, but I'm going to do so working with Republicans, Democrats, and independents, recognizing that we can do so as citizens.
Thank you. All right, ma'am, if you had your hand up, do you have a question?
Yes. Candidates, illegal immigration has so adversely affected our economy and America. It's been very destructive to America. What do you propose to do to help to reduce or even to get rid of illegal immigration?